But whenever we're distributed, we often have some online confusion. When we're in person, there's usually some sort of set schedules, when people are going to be collectively together. But in a distributed model, as a lot of you have alluded to, we operate in mixed time zones, and that can be challenging. When you're in person, you as a manager or leader just have visibility of work that's getting done. You can see it happening and unfolding in front of you. Whereas when it's distributed, sometimes there's a degree of obscurity. And when you're in person, it's easy to bring people together for periods of collaboration and planning for that collective focus all at one time. Whereas whenever you're distributed, the reality is people have competing priorities, whether they're working at home or in the field or working in a different office. It's hard to get a group to focus for a period of time on the same thing. All of which lends itself to what I see are 5 key challenges for managers and leaders in leading a distributed team. I'd love for you just to think through which of these are your biggest challenges. First, communication, and that takes 2 aspects. One, just the medium. What tools do we use for communication? And secondly, how do we ensure that we're communicating the message in the way that we want? Merely just tracking progress. How do I, as a manager or a leader, know where my team is at any time towards the goals that we've set for ourselves? Holding your team accountable, having those discussions around the work, ensuring that it's getting done and moving towards the goals that we've set for each other. Maintaining employee motivation. It's hard to elevate morale in a distributed model. It's hard to even sense sometimes when somebody's struggling with morale. It's easy to default to just technically getting the work done. All of which adds up to the difficulties of creating a positive culture. It's hard to build a culture in a distributed team that goes beyond just the day-to-day work, that actually causes or encourages people to want to work there. So let me ask you this. We're going to show up one more poll for us here. Of those 5 challenges, as I was reading through them, which of those do you struggle with most? Which of these challenges do you personally struggle with most? New poll. Would love to hear from you. Those managers and leaders that are able to build successful distributed teams typically do at least 3, if not 4 or 5 of the things I'm about to share with you. The first is to lead yourself first. And by that, I mean, if you're working in a virtual world and you don't have a handle on your day-to-day and your week-to-week and your month-to-month, it's going to be very difficult for you to lead a team. And so that's why we're actually going to spend a little bit of time just ensuring that you've got a good platform for what you need to do. Secondly, those managers and leaders that are good at leading in a distributed environment tend to focus more on outcomes rather than inputs. And this one's actually, funnily enough, it's a little counterintuitive for what I've found is that managers and leaders that spend too much time working or focusing on the inputs of their team come across as micromanagers in a distributed world. Whereas they focus on the outcomes that their team get, they're much more likely to build a positive working culture. The third thing that they do is that they manage processes, but they lead people. Getting work done in a distributed world requires the implementation of an additional layer of process that you might require in an in-person office. And so they manage those processes, but they don't overly manage their people towards success by focusing on those outcomes. Fourth, they match the media message. By that, I mean, when they look at how to communicate with their team, there are so many communication tools out there. And in order to be an effective leader, you've got to choose the right tool for the right message. We'll spend a little bit of time later on looking at the types of tools that are out there for various type of communications that you need to have. And then finally, they're very intentional about their interactions. They don't just get people together on video calls for the sake of getting people together on video calls. There's a specific intention behind that interaction. They don't just gather their team together in the office for an in-day meeting because they've been told that they have to. They are intentional about it. And again, we'll talk a little bit about how to be intentional about those interactions. You'll see on page 1 of the workbook a place to jot down those key behaviors if you would like to, if there's something you're going to work through to help you build those key behaviors. Here's where we're going to spend the rest of our time together. 1, we're going to take a look at how to design your own personal system, get yourself situated for a remote first world. Then we'll look at how to manage your team's workflow. There are 3 specific things we'll look at there. Number 3, you'll build your virtual toolkit. We'll have a conversation around particular tools to use. 4, we'll look at how to instill accountability and build positive culture, which a lot of you I know are excited about given the poll results. And then finally, I'll give you the opportunity to build that remote action plan. So let's take a look at building your own system first. There are essentially 5 things that we're going to cover during this portion. 1, we're going to take a look at how to set your goals for the next week, month, quarter, which will ultimately be your North Star for driving the work for you and your team. Next, we'll look at how to take those goals and then really bring them to runway focus so that you're able to have blinkers on to concentrate and focus on the work that needs to get done today and this week. We'll spend a little bit of time looking at how to structure your day for maximum productivity so that you're not easily pulled in other directions. We'll look at how to manage distractions as they come in. And then we're going to take a look at how to maximize in-office days. Now, you may already do 1 or 2 or all 5 of these things. And if you do, that's great. But there may be a few things in here that you can just tweak a little bit to really help you in your day-to-day as you're getting acclimated to a remote first world. So let's take a look at goal setting. First of all, why is it important? Well, I'm a big believer in setting 90-day goals. 90-day goals are great because they are long enough that we can make progress towards them over 3 months, a long enough period of time, but they're not so long that it's easy to forget about them. I like to do things in 90-day sprints. It helps to focus you and your team on the work that needs to get done in the medium term. And so as I work with leaders and help them through this process, I get them to consider, what do you need to achieve this quarter, this month, and this week? Not just to consider what you need to achieve during those time frames, but also what might get in your way and what assistance do you need. Now, what you want to achieve this quarter may look slightly different to what you want to achieve this month, which will likely look slightly different to what you want to achieve this week. But there should be a natural build that as you look at your weekly goals and then your monthly goals and then your quarterly goals, you should see how they build on one another so that by the time that you get to the end of the next 90 days, you can look back and evaluate all of the great work that you did. What I'd like you to do is to take page 2 in your work, right at the top here, you'll see that there's a table and I've listed out quarterly, monthly, and weekly, and then a place for you to jot down the answer to the questions that are there. I'd like you to just pull out 1 goal for this quarter, 1 goal for this month, and 1 goal for this week. So let's define the quarter as January through to March. I know we're already a couple of weeks in. Let's define this month as from now until the end of January. And then let's define this week as between now and the end of the week. I'd love you to jot down 1 goal for each of those time frames, and then jot down what might get in your way of achieving that goal and what assistance do you need. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to do that, and then I'll check in with you to see how it went. So 5 minutes to find a goal for the goal that you've defined for yourself there. There will likely be a next best step for you to get you closer to that, a next action that you need to take. And I'd love for you to take a little time to consider what that might be. So a good example is I have a desire of a goal to go on another vacation with my wife. And my next best step is to research hotels in Bora Bora. That's a very specific next action that has a verb. It has a doing word in there. It's clear. It's concise. I know what I need to do to move me closer to that goal. So what I'd love for you to consider is, what are some of those must-do next best steps that you need to complete this week to get you closer to that weekly or monthly goal? And then what might be some of those next to-do next best steps? They would be nice to complete this week, but if you didn't get them done, that's okay. I'd love for you to take 3 minutes and just look at either that weekly or that monthly or maybe even that quarterly goal and define what's the next best step to get you there, get you closer to achieving it. You can begin to fill those out on works about those 2 activities. And just as a reminder, the reason that we're starting with ourselves is or week or month, very hard for us to build a system that will work for our team. And so we've got to get absolute clarity on what we're working towards first of all. So share with me, what did you notice during exercises? What was interesting? Saying the week was the hardest. Yeah, sometimes. The small steps to get to a large goal. Thanks for sharing. What else did you notice? Writing it down makes it visible for sure. If you've ever taken my top management for new managers course, you'd be familiar with the fact that I talk about how our brain is for having ideas, not holding them. There's a quote from a guy called David Allen many years ago. It's absolutely true, JD. Put it down, make it visible. Excellent, thank you. Need more focus time away from the distraction. That's a huge point and a really good pivot ER. MG, if the video and voice is breaking, try refreshing your screen or your browser. And if that's still not working, I can see if there's something else I can do on my end. So back to ER, your point, more focus time away from the distractions. Let's just talk about that for a moment or two. Let's talk about, first of all, how to structure your day to minimize that, and then how to manage those distractions. So you'll find on page 3 of your workbook, I've put out just a real simple daily agenda. Here is what I find works really well in structuring your day. There are 3 things to think about on a daily basis to help you minimize those distractions. The first is obviously that you've got to look at your hard landscape. Now, your hard landscape are those meetings that you know that you have to be at, the already scheduled meetings. So as you're planning any given day for yourself, jotting them down is number 1, because those are sort of, for the most part, immovable. The second thing to do then is to schedule the deep work. So to take a look at some of those next best steps that will get you closer to achieving your goals, and actually to actively schedule them in so that you know that during that period of time, you're focused on them and nothing else. And then the third thing to do is to take those next best steps and, where possible, to group them by context. So if there are a bunch of emails you need to write, grouping all of them together at the same time and going through them in one go can be really helpful to keep you focused and not get distracted. If you've got a bunch of coding to do, just grouping those next best steps and working through that at the same time can be really helpful. So although we don't have time to do it on our session today, I'd encourage you to take a look at the agenda that I've got for you in page 3, and on a daily basis, book in those meetings that you have, schedule in those periods of deep work, and then think about your next best steps and grouping them together in the context that makes most sense. What that does for you then, if you can see what we're trying to build up here, is we've got that set of goals for the next quarter and the month. You're looking at what you need to do for this week. And then on a daily basis, you're building the process to be able to crank through it. So what can we do to manage distractions? The first thing to do is to protect those periods of deep work. So if there are things that you know that you need to get done and get through, switching off your email, switching off your chat, putting a not available for the next 30 minutes, not available for the next hour is a really helpful way to manage those distractions. Now, that might seem a little bit anxiety inducing for most of you in this world where we feel like we need to be always on. But I encourage you to take, if you can't do it for 30 minutes, do it for 15 minutes. Just a period of time where you're able to really focus on the work that you need to get done and not going in search of those endorphin rushes to get you to the next bit of communication that comes in. Second is to avoid unnecessary context shifting. So how often do you feel like your day goes from answering emails to looking at whatever your chat message is, to doing a little bit of work, to going to a meeting, to answering some more emails, to going to another chat? That's all stuff that we need to do during our day, but the more that you switch contexts, every time you move from one tool to the next, you actually leave a little bit of attention residue in that previous task. There's a guy called Cal Newport talks a lot about this, that every time you move from email to chat to a meeting to actually doing some hard work, it takes your brain about 15 or 20 minutes to fully immerse itself in the task at hand. And it's a lot of leakage of your attention as you do that. So try as much as possible to avoid unnecessary context shifting. I'd encourage you to schedule procrastination, to say to yourself, okay, I'm going to give myself 10 minutes to scroll through whatever your favorite news site is or your favorite social media platform is, but schedule it in at the end of a period of deep work, 15 minutes, and then procrastinate for 5 minutes. We live in a world where we can't possibly be engaged all the time, but rather than just reactively procrastinating, schedule it in so that you know that it's there and it's waiting for you. And then the final thing to think about doing, I alluded to it earlier, is to change your environment. If there is something that's holding you back, it's the physical presence for you that's really causing you to be distracted, I would encourage you to change your environment and remove that temptation for you. What I'd love for you to do, if you look at page 4, I've got a section for you on what that runway level work is. You've started to consider what you might need to book in on a daily basis to work through that, those next best steps. And we've just talked about how to manage some of those distractions. So you've got hopefully 1 or 2 things in that you want to put in place for your own daily system, your own personal system of managing virtually. What that does for us then is once we're comfortable and confident in working through the work that we need to get through, we can then begin to look at our team and the workflow to help ensure that they're getting done what they need to get done on any given basis. And in building your team workflow, you want to look at 3 main things. First of all, how do we help our team agree their monthly, weekly, and then daily focus? How do we take some of those lessons that we just learned for ourselves and actually help our team work through that? How do we manage new inputs into our team, new asks, new requests, new work that comes in? How do we ensure that we don't just take that all on ourselves, but that we're able to distribute it amongst our team appropriately? And then thirdly, how do we give feedback in a virtual, hybrid, or distributed world? So let's take a look at building your team workflow first of all. And you can follow along. I am on page 6 in the workbook. So although we started with quarterly goals for you, I often find that the best place to start with our team are the monthly goals. And building in a system where you're able to regularly, on a monthly basis, review progress to their own individual goals. And in building out this interaction with your team, I'm a huge proponent of a traffic light review. So if you think about the goals that your team has, either collectively or individually, on a monthly basis, just looking at them and saying, okay, what's green, what's on track, what's yellow, what's a little off track, but there is a plan in place. And then what's red, what's off track and needs assistance from you or perhaps another leader in the organization. So I'm encouraging you to get together with your team once a month and going through their own goals using this system. A good thing to then address once you've gone through what's green, yellow, and red is just what's working well for your team and you, either in them working through the goals that they have in front of them or in how you're engaging with them, and what might you do differently next time. So do you already have a monthly meeting with your team that works through an agenda like this, that gives them the opportunity to share what's working well and what they'd like to do differently? If not, I'd encourage you to book something in. And the best medium to do that in, if you have the opportunity, is to have it as a video call, or if you have those in-office days where you're able to get together and really work through all of these at the same time. That helps ensure that your team is focused on a monthly basis on those overarching quarterly goals. So that's one interaction that you might want to consider booking in with your team in this workflow. The next interaction then is on a weekly basis, and that's to help them focus on what they need to get done this week. It's really helpful to start with a review of last week, and then to have each person in your team identify 3 to 5 key projects that need to be progressed this week. This gives you visibility into the work that's being done. If you remember, we talked about one of those challenges is that we don't have visibility into the work that's done. If they're able to identify 3 to 5 key projects that need to be progressed, you begin to get a little bit more transparency in. Good for them to share with you potential roadblocks that they see in getting those projects progressed. And then for them to share any support that they need from you, potentially to overcome those roadblocks. A manager and leader in a distributed world becomes this role of ensuring that you're helping people identify those roadblocks in front of them and giving them the support that they need. Best way to tackle this is either on a video call, if you can get everybody together at the same time. I understand that working across time zones can be challenging, or just have folks on your chat app just answer these 4 questions on a weekly basis, whatever the start of their week is. Just say, hey, share with me last week what worked well, what didn't work so well. Share with me the 3 to 5 key projects that you need to progress this week. Share with me some of those potential roadblocks that you see, and what support that you need from me. If you can get them into a drumbeat of sharing that with you on a weekly basis, it can really help you understand your role in unlocking some of this for them. And then if you're able to, I'm a big believer in a really quick touch base on a daily basis, just to help identify some of those blockers for today. Doesn't have to be a lengthy meeting, but just get them to review some of their next best steps. And hopefully you've got an understanding of what that is from what we worked through. What do they need to do today? What are some key meetings that they may be involved in where they might not be available? What are their periods of deep work? Because here's the thing, that if you want your team to progress on their goals, you've got to give them an opportunity to work through the work that's in front of them without you adding additional pressure and stress. So if you can get insight into those key meetings that they're in and the periods of deep work that they need to go to, you can respect and understand those boundaries that they have. Then any potential roadblocks that they might have on that daily basis, and any support that they need today. So you can see, hopefully, that you're helping build a drumbeat of execution in your team. What do we need to get done this month? What do you need to get done this week? What do you need to get done today? What's most important for you? Where are your roadblocks, potential roadblocks? How might I best support you in doing that? And this brings visibility to that work that's being done. If you're going to do a daily meeting like this, if you can get folks together for a video call, that's great. I understand that in different time zones that might not be possible, and so then just a quick chat message again is perfectly fine. And I would just copy and paste this and just say every morning, hey, what are your next best steps today? What are your key meetings? Where are your periods of deep work? What are those potential roadblocks, and what support do you need from me? It should take them no more than 5 minutes just to get that out there, and then you can begin to work on loosening some of that stuff for them. So what I'd love for you to do is to consider on a, this should say monthly, weekly, and daily. It actually says quarterly, monthly, and weekly. So forgive me for that. I'll need to make that change. But what I'd love for you to do is to think about those 3 interactions with your team on a monthly, weekly, and daily basis. If you don't already have a meeting scheduled for those, just identify when are you going to book that in? Who needs to be there? What medium are you going to use? Are you just going to have chat, or are you going to actually gather people for a video call? And then what data might you need to help put those what are your next steps? Who needs to be in those meetings? When are you going to have them? What medium is it going to be? Will it be chat? Will it be face-to-face? Will it be video call? And then what data you need? Hey, folks. I hope this is better. Somebody give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay. Hey, folks. Am I here? Can you hear me? Okay, we got a thumbs up. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for keeping me right. Love to see all of those thumbs up. Awesome. So I'm just going to give you 2 minutes to jot down. Oh, down for a couple of folks. Brittany, can you give me a verbal on?
Yes, I can hear you on both computers.
Okay. All right. We will continue as it is. So let's do the exercise. 2 minutes, jot down on a monthly, weekly, and daily basis when you're going to have those meetings, who needs to be there, what medium you're going to use, and we're going to go on to how to manage new inputs for both you and your team. But before we get there, I realize we have been going for an hour, so I want to give us an opportunity to take a break.